And there are steps that you can take that include using automatic lights when you're not home, letting neighbors know when you're away, and not letting mail pile up. We'll have these tips for you right on our News 8 website and app.
Greetings, brothers.
Brothers, we ask that you mute yourself, please. Please mute yourself.
Good evening. My name is Alexander Jones, and I have the esteemed privilege of serving as boss list of the Epsilon Iota chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. We thank you for attending our Omega Uplift Series number 19 in education on stress and depression. In less than 10 days, over 200 Omega men will descend upon New Haven as we gather for our 86th First District Conference. While handling the business of Omega, we will also be providing community forums open to the public on financial planning and mental health matters at our district conference. Tonight's program will serve as a kickoff to our conference as we begin discussion around stress and depression. We have partnered with our First District Brother You're on My Mind committee, which is geared toward making sure that as a fraternity, we are our brothers' keepers as we ensure that we educate brothers on mental health matters and also assist by providing the connections to appropriate resources. I want to thank the Brotherhood You're on My Mind committee for partnering with our chapter social action committee as we are able to present this information and dialogue on such a necessary topic. Since the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated was founded on the campus of Howard University 110 years ago, we have been guided by our four cardinal principles of manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. Omega has played and continues to play a vital role in the social and economic growth of our country by enhancing the lives of African Americans. As a fraternity, we operate under 12 nationally mandated programs, which are centralized around issues in our communities. Epsilon Iota chapter has been a staple by providing service to the greater New Haven community for over 32 years. Before we get started, I would like to share a few reminders. All participants will be muted during this presentation, but we do encourage your active participation by utilizing the chat feature. All questions will be acknowledged at the appropriate time. I would like to take the time to thank our esteemed panelists for agreeing to participate and give their expertise on this very important subject matter. Our Uplift Series moderator is a brother who plays many key roles in Omega, not only on the chapter level, but also on the district and international levels. Just like Omega, he is no stranger to the greater New Haven community, where he serves as head coach to the Wilbercross boys varsity basketball team. He serves as the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the Area Cooperative Educational Services, better known as ACES. He is a co-founder of the Storytellers New Haven. He is a mentor to the youth, a leader amongst many men, and an advocate for all. We hope you enjoy our program. I will now introduce to some and present to others our Omega Uplift Series moderator, Brother Kevin Walton.
Good evening, brothers, and thank you for that kind introduction, Brother Basilis. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. As Brother Jones stated, my name is Kevin E. Walton Sr., also known as Midnight 1 EII 92. And I had the distinct honor of serving as the Uplift Series moderator since its inception in March of 2020. While most of the Uplift Series community conversations have been coordinated by EII, tonight's program is a little different, as we have partnered with the formidable First District and the Brother You Are on My Mind committee and the First District of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Tonight's program is special, not only because we are joined by brothers from throughout New England and other parts of the country, but the program is the unofficial kickoff to the 86th First District Conference, will be held at the Omni Hotel in beautiful downtown New Haven, April 21st to 23rd. As Brother Jones stated, we will share information about the public events associated with the district conference. We will also drop the link in the chat where you can purchase tickets to the Royal Affair, which will take place on Saturday night at the Omni Hotel. So now enough with the shameless plugs. And with protocol having been established, let's get right to the program. Tonight's Uplift Series entitled An Education on Stress and Depression. Our guest panelists for the evening are marriage and family therapist, Brother Isaac Bethea, Doctor of Clinical Psychology, Brother Garrett Boulier, and Educational Psychologist, Brother Canaan Bethea. So without further ado, I will now turn the program over to our first panelist, Brother Isaac Bethea.
Good evening, all. I am Isaac Bethea. I am a marriage and family therapist operating or working in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I will start tonight's presentation discussing stress. Kanye, can you share the slides with us, please? I'm going to start off our discussion on stress by just giving a basic definition of stress, just so that we can all have a common understanding, because a lot of things have multiple definitions. Next slide. All right. So stress, from the definition that I am choosing to utilize today, is a state of worry or mental tension. It can be caused by a demanding situation. We generally view stress as a negative, something that is happening when we are faced with a dangerous situation. But I think that that definition is slightly limited, and I will explain why as we proceed through our process tonight. Next slide, please. What is stress? Well, you know, we all have our different thoughts of what stress is. And so what I want to do also is just discuss what stress is. Next slide. So stress is a normal biological response, often to a perceived threat. The main thing that stress is the release of hormones, especially adrenaline and cortisol, surging throughout our bodies to help us appropriately respond to various situations. Let's say if you saw a wild animal near you, the adrenaline and the cortisol will allow you to have increased blood flow, increased oxygen to your lungs, so that you can run fast and for a longer distance. So the adrenaline rush of the stress allows you to perform at a higher capacity than when you're not experiencing stress. Next slide, please. Common symptoms of stress. I'm not going to read this entire list, but as I mentioned, that stress is the release of adrenaline and cortisol into our bloodstream, and it leads to faster heart rate, breathing rate increase. We often start sweating more. Often, if you're doing it in a longer term situation, you may have sleep issues. You may be hypervigilant, where you're alert to things you would not normally be alert to. And you might also experience heightened irritability. So you're much easier angered or annoyed. Next slide, please. Common stresses. I want you to look at this. I broke these common stressors into two parts. Granted, I'm not listing all of them, but I listed a couple. So on this slide, we see financial loss, health issues, witnessing violence, because stressors can be from us witnessing a situation that we are not a participant in, not just in something that we ourselves experience. And as the last one on this slide is challenging relationships. As we switch to the next slide, I want you to try to see the difference between this one and the next one. So as you see on this slide, we have promotion, bigger house, new relationship, birth in the family. If we look at this list, most people would list these stressors as positive. somewhere many, many years ago, I heard that a person can generally only navigate 3 to 4 major stressors at a time. And it doesn't matter if they are positive or negative. So let's say you have a new baby, you got a promotion, and you're dealing with, let's say, a parent being sick. That all combined will be a challenge for you, even though 2 of them are considered positive stressors. Next slide, please. The American Psychology Association identifies 3 types of stress. And so I'm going to touch on each of the 3 and how they impact us in our daily lives. Next slide, please. So the first one is acute stress. Acute stress is probably the stress that most of us are most commonly familiar with. You know, you see something that you perceive as dangerous, you think that you have a potentially overwhelming situation facing you. It's generally a short-term situation that just arises, and you know, you can generally overcome it in a short period of time. However, acute stress can be concerning if we allow it to linger. Sometimes we may have a situation that we fixate on. Let's say we sprain our ankle. After a day or 2, our ankle is not getting any worse, but we may think about how our life is being negatively impacted, and that may lead to us having greater emotional and psychological impact than just the limited pain that we have already dealt with. Next slide, please. Episodic acute stress is pretty similar to acute stress, except that it will often occur in a regular basis. Let's say a person hates writing, but for their job, they have a weekly or a monthly report that is due. Then that may lead to them feeling overwhelmed or stressed. And so they can kind of know that it's going to come up on a particular cycle, or maybe it may not be a routine cycle, but they still know that it's a pattern. And this clear and persistent pattern can lead to an ongoing impact on both the mind and the body. Next slide, please. Chronic stress. Chronic stress is an ongoing and constant stress where there's often no relief. A good example of this would be something like racism. It's not something that we can just say, okay, I'm going to deal with this or absolve myself of it. It's not going to go away in any short term. So it's something that we have to live our lives with. Oftentimes, this can lead to a ongoing elevated level of adrenaline and what was that other hormone? Pardon me. Just ongoing levels of hormones that give us negative health outcomes, increased blood pressure, diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. So, and oftentimes, due to the chronic stress, we don't even realize it. If our blood pressure is raised for an extended period of time, we're not even aware. Let's say, I know when I was younger, I used to listen to my music real loud. Well, after a period of time, it felt like it was a normal level unless I left the room and returned. And so if we're living with chronic stress, we often don't even realize it. We just kind of say, okay, this pain is normal, and I'm going to kind of ignore it, which allows it to progressively get worse. Next slide, please. And what I really wanted to highlight in our stress process is that stress is on a continuum. As you see the two words at the top of the screen, one is eustress and the other is de-stress. So as I mentioned, some stress is positive. It helps us to focus when we may have a job interview, first date, we may be competing in an athletic competition. Having that level of stress, let's say like the butterflies, will cause us to hone in and focus on significant aspects that allow us to perform at a higher level than we normally would. At the other end of the spectrum is de-stress. De-stress often leads to us feeling overwhelmed, and that can lead to us having sleep issues, depression, and anxiety. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Brother Dr. Garrett Boulier.
Thank you, team. I really appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Boulier. I am a clinical.
Dr. Boulier, can we pause for a second and recognize our Grand Basileus, Brother Ricky Lewis, that's in attendance tonight? Brother Lewis.
Hey, brothers, how are y'all?
Good
Good,
evening,
brother.
Brother Grant.
Grand.
Good. Yeah, I'm driving, so I just wanted to get on. Brother Marlon sent me the link. I just want to jump on and thank the brothers for their hard work. This has been an outstanding session. When I pull over and be able to come off the camera, but I'm gonna listen in and certainly thank all the brothers for their hard work. Looking forward to seeing the brothers in New Haven in a couple of weeks to come up to fellowship in the first D. I appreciate this opportunity. Give me a few seconds to say a few words. And brothers, again, thank you for your service, and we thank your families for allowing you to serve. I yield back.
Thank you for being here, Brother Grant.
Yes.
Thank you, Brother Grant. So yeah, again, my name is Dr. Garrett Boulier. I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Baltimore VA. I have my doctorate in clinical psychology, and I just graduated this past October. So as Brother Bethea was just talking about stress, and now I'm going to transition into depression, right? So what is depression? Just in its most simplest form, it's a common mood disorder that affects how a person feels, thinks, and behaves throughout their day. You can go to the next slide. So before I continue discussing about depression, I really want to highlight the difference between depression and sadness. A lot of people who aren't really familiar in the field of psychology or in the field of mental health typically use these two terms synonymously. And I really want to talk about the differences between these two terms. For one, sadness is an emotion that can occur when stressful, painful, or upsetting event happens. So again, kind of like what Brother Bethea was talking about, everything regarding stress, sure, you may feel sad, right? I wanted to also highlight that sadness is just one characteristic of depression. Feeling sad does not always equate to being depressed. So yes, you can be sad, but not depressed. But if you are depressed, you are sad, if that makes sense. There's nothing wrong with feeling sad because it's normal. It's a normal emotion, just like happiness and anger. But depression is much more than an emotion. You can be sad and not depressed, like I just said, right? Depression is a mental illness that occurs for longer periods of time and significantly impacts one's functioning. A depressive episode can arise without trigger, and unlike sadness, it doesn't flee easily. That's because it affects your mood, your self-concept, your relation to others, and your overall quality of life, typically all at once. So again, one is more so an emotion, a normal emotion that we all feel, sometime in our lives. And another one is a more serious mental illness. That's also pretty common, throughout the country and throughout everybody in this world. Go to the next slide. So what can trigger, depression, right? Childhood experiences, particularly, trauma, life events, experiencing abuse, experiencing a death of a loved one, the loss of a job, stress like Brother Bethea was just talking about, physical health problems or illnesses, being lonely, biological factors, and I'll definitely elaborate on the type of factors, so your genes, your hormones, your brain chemicals, medication side effects, recreational drug and alcohol use, poor sleep, diet and exercise. So again, I'm gonna elaborate on some of these as well, because these are all triggers that can lead to depression. Go to the next slide. So what are the risk factors, right? I like to break it down in different type of brackets, so it's a little bit more easier to digest and understand. So going from, starting from the left, biological, right? So biological, risk factors, these are essentially things that that predispose you to depression, makes you more susceptible. So make you more vulnerable to at risk of having, depression, right? So brain chemistry, and I'm gonna definitely touch on that later down the slide, so we'll skip on that for now. But genetics, right? Family members who are depressed are more likely to become depressed. So if your mother, your grandmother, your father, your grandfather, if they have depression, there's a higher likelihood for you to be diagnosed with depression. Also, having a family history of depression doesn't mean you will also experience depression in your lifetime. It just increases your likelihood. And also a genetic predisposition for major depression has an increased risk for suicide attempts across all psychiatric disorders. So not just depression. And this was from the American Journal of Psychiatry back in 2019. Next is chronic pain and illness. Oh wait, no, you can go, yeah, you can stay right there. I'll let you know when to switch. Next is chronic pain and illness, right? So multiple sclerosis, type 2 diabetes, migraines, and the list can go on. A person with a chronic pain or illness may become depressed due to the situation, especially when they're facing loss of quality of life, a reduced level of day-to-day functioning, prolonged pain, and or death, possibly arising in their life. Next, hormones. Especially with women, hormonal changes associated with the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, giving birth, and menopause can all contribute to depression. It's also not unusual for people with thyroid conditions to experience depression. While symptoms tend to be a little bit more common with people with low functioning thyroid, so which is hypothyroidism, people with an overactive thyroid, hyperthyroidism, can also experience anxiety, depression. And I also wanted to acknowledge, according to the CDC, they estimate around 1 in 9 women in the US report experiencing postpartum depression. So it's really important to understand, women, especially giving birth, are predisposed to at risk to having clinical depression. And it's more, again, than just sadness. And I'll definitely elaborate on what else depression consists of outside of just feeling sad. Next, environmental factors, right? So racism and discrimination, Brother Bethea talked about, racism regarding stress. Racial discrimination was associated with more depressive symptoms in every age group for Black men. Race-based everyday discrimination was also associated with suicidal ideation in Black men. Police brutality, experiencing, but also watching it, being vicariously traumatized when you're indirectly affected by seeing footage after footage after footage of a Black person being killed by the police. That can increase depressive symptoms. Racial barriers, access to care, including racism from care providers, and even the mental health stigma can also be contributed to depression. Black women in primary care, they found that 49% of Black women had depressive symptoms of depression and 10% experienced suicidal thoughts. So again, these barriers of access to care, racism, police brutality, all these things, and this is just environmental factors on why we as Black people may be more predisposed to depression. Another thing, environmental trauma, abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. These can all be contributed to depression. By household dysfunction, domestic violence, divorce. If you have a parent that's mentally ill, you have a parent that uses substances, a parent who may be incarcerated, that can affect you. Poverty, that's another factor that can contribute to depression. In regard to social factors, low self-esteem, mental health conditions such as anxiety and eating disorders. With depression, it's common that other psychiatric symptoms can be comorbid, meaning that you can have two different diagnoses at the same time. So typically depression and anxiety sometimes go hand in hand with each other. Stress and conflict, grief and loss, and nowadays even social media. Social media, especially in the younger generation, the Gen Z and even millennials, have increased anxiety and depressive symptoms. I also want to highlight the thing about social factors, right? So research has shown that social support can protect against a range of mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, and psychological distress. For example, studies on depression have found that African Americans who receive more frequent emotional support are in more frequent contact with family and extended members are less likely to meet the criteria for a major depressive disorder. There's also evidence that has demonstrated that social support can protect against suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts. So essentially, that community prioritizes the group over the individual. And as Black people, as African people, we are a collectivistic, group of people, but we live in an individualistic society, being in America. So for us as Black people, it takes a village is more than just an African proverb. It literally can improve your mental health. And lastly, lifestyle, medication side effects, like I said before, substance use, poor diet, and low physical activity. There's a word called neurotransmitters, which is essentially chemical messengers that your body needs and can't function without. And their job is to essentially carry signals, which is like messages from one nerve cell to another. And when you exercise, you release a wide variety of neurotransmitters: dopamine, the pleasure hormone; noradrenaline, the concentration hormone; serotonin, the mood hormone; endorphins, which can elicit euphoria. So even just something as simple as just exercising can improve how you feel, which goes back to the biological aspect of the brain chemistry. You can go on to the next slide. What does depression look like? Right. This is a question that people always ask. It's more than just feeling sad, people say, but what does it actually look like? So again, I like to break it down in brackets, right? So your thoughts: being self-critical, having low self-esteem, low self-compassion, thoughts of self-harm, death, and/or suicide, reoccurring negative thoughts, having a negative attitude, lack of a future orientation. So you're not really even thinking about where you're going to be a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. Not feeling good enough, difficulties concentrating, a negative outlook on life and situations. Feelings in your mind, feeling emotionally numb or empty, being irritable, lonely, having that guilt or shame, hopeless, worthless, feeling excessively sad. I wanted to highlight one special symptom regarding the feelings that you have in your mind, which is irritability. One thing I noticed in my work, and it's also consistent with the research, Black men and boys typically externalize how they feel, meaning how they express, their anger is more with more behaviorally. They'll lash out, they'll scream, they'll be more destructive. The thing about depression is that when you're irritable, that's a very common symptom. So sometimes a person may be feeling sad. A person may be feeling angry, but they're actually depressed. And the thing is, we only just look at that anger as just, oh, wow, he's just mad. But actually that person might be depressed. If you're experiencing the things I just mentioned before, experiencing racism, experiencing poverty, experiencing stress, experiencing discrimination, all these things, that can make you mad. But what we see is the anger, but what that person is actually feeling is depression. But they don't even recognize it because to them, they were never told about it. The stigma that comes with it, feeling sad is looked as being weak, how we look at the stereotypes of what it is to be a man and everything. You can go to the next slide. Feelings in your body, right? So I talked about feelings in your mind, now feelings in your body. So having that low sex drive, feeling fatigue, loss of energy nearly every day. Sometimes people think somebody's just being lazy. Oh, they're not getting up. They don't do anything with their lives, just laying down. Sometimes you really just don't have that energy. And that loss of energy is a very big common symptom. Headaches or body aches, appetite changes, brain fog, you're not really remembering things, feeling restless, slowed down, feeling that heavy feeling. Again, these are all symptoms that are more than just feeling sad. So when you're feeling sad and when you're feeling depressed, it's very important to really distinguish which one are you really feeling. Are you really depressed, or are you just sad? Behaviors: isolating yourself from others, suicide attempts, lack of pleasure in activities you once enjoyed. Another word for that is anhedonia. Self-harming behaviors. So you may not be attempting suicide, but you might be cutting yourself. You might be burning yourself. Poor hygiene. Somebody who hasn't showered in days, in weeks. Somebody hasn't brushed their teeth. That's a very common symptom for depression. Low energy, again, not really having the energy to get up. Changing in eating habits or weight. Maybe you're eating too much. Maybe you're not eating enough. Frequent crying. Increased irritability, low frustration and tolerance. Again, going back to that irritability piece. What I typically tell people is sadness and anger are two sides of the same coin. The same thing that you could be sad about is the same thing you could be angry about. But it all depends on how you react to that situation. Loss of interest or low motivation. Trouble going to sleep or sleeping too much when you're laying in bed all day. That person's just lazy, not really trying to do anything. But when you really feel fatigue in your body, you just want to sleep all day. You just want to lay in bed. That's a common symptom of depression. Excessive use of substances, the use of drugs, use of alcohol. Alcohol chemically is a depressant. So you're drinking alcohol to get rid of the pain, which causes you to feel more sad because it's a depressant. You can go on to the next slide. So types of depression, right? So when we hear depression, people just say depression, right? But there's so many different types of depression. It's not just like depression is a word, but it's an umbrella. So the most common type of depression is major depressive disorder. When somebody says they're depressed, typically 9 times out of 10, they're referring to major depressive disorder. But there's other terms: disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, persistent depressive disorder, aka dysthymia, bipolar disorder, seasonal affective disorder, that's seasonal depression, peripartum depression, postpartum, so basically that postpartum, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD, situational depression, aka adjustment disorder with depressed mood. And I'm gonna run through some of these disorders very soon. You go on to the next slide. So just breaking down major depressive disorder, which is really the most common one that people talk about. Really just want to acknowledge this one via the slide. So again, to be diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, 5 or more symptoms must be present during the same 2-week period and represent a change from your previous functioning. So if you've been feeling quote unquote depressed for a couple of days, you do not meet the criteria for depression. You may be feeling sad for a couple of days, but it has to be occurring during a 2-week period. It must affect or cause impairment in your social, occupational, or any other areas of functioning, not attributed to the effects of a substance or medical condition. Persistently depressed or loss of activities, causing significant impairment in daily activity. So again, that feeling excessively sad or that loss of interest, those are the two, you must have one or the other in regards to have that diagnosis of clinical depression. Some more symptoms, and I already shared it before when I broke down those brackets, but again, changes in your sleep, your appetite, your energy level, concentration, your daily behavior, your self-esteem. Depression can also be associated with suicidal thoughts. Go on to the next slide. Oh, actually, matter of fact, you can go back, my fault. So I wanted to discuss a few more disorders, like I said. So again, DMDD, that's more of a child and adolescent behavior. That consists of like severe recurrent temper outbursts, typically either verbally or behaviorally. It's inconsistent with the developmental level of that child, and it happens 3 or more times a week. Usually that child is irritable or angry nearly every day, and is also observable by others. And this also must be occurring in 2 of 3 different settings. So it must be occurring in your home, must be occurring in the school, or around their friends. So at least 2 of those settings I just shared occurring over a year. Another one is dysthymia. Another word for that is really just, it's a chronic mild depression. And for you to fit the criteria for dysthymia is basically, essentially you having depression for at least 2 years for adults, or at least 1 year for children. Bipolar disorder, that really, and that comes in 2 types. Essentially, it's consisting of having a manic, which either can be mania or hypomania episode, with a depressive episode lasting for at least 1 week respectively, or that's bipolar 1, or bipolar 2, which is having 1 hypomanic episode and 1 major depressive episode. Situational depression, aka that adjustment disorder. And that starts within 3 months of a stressful event, but lasts no longer than 6 months after the stressful event occurred. So again, going back to what Brother Bethea was talking about with stress, if you got fired from a job, you're feeling down in the dumps. You may be feeling like, feeling all messed up. You may fit the criteria for that situational depression, for that adjustment disorder with a depressive episode, but not clinical depression. Because if you get another job that may be paying you higher, you're gonna feel all right after. So it's a situation, it's an adjustment, it's a change of what happens in your life. So, but also it can happen, sometimes it can go beyond 6 months because it can be chronic. So let's say if you're unemployed for more than 6 months, you may be feeling down longer than 6 months. So, but that depressed mood, that's one criteria. That situational adjustment disorder can be associated with anxiety and depression combined. Adjustment disorder with disturbance of conduct, which is a behavioral problem. So it's a wide variety of different types of situational diagnoses. But this was just a little description of a few different other types of depressive disorders that can also occur. That's outside of the clinical depression that we know commonly. We most commonly know. You go on to the next slide. The brain, again, like I said before, when we talk about the brain chemistry, when we talk about what's happening to you biologically, these are things like depression is more than just feeling sad. Your brain literally changes. You lose gray matter volume when you are depressed. And that's caused by the hippocampus raising the cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which affects the development of the neurons in your brain. And as you can see on the slide, dendrites are cellular extensions found in the neurons, which are just nerve cells. And this suggests that depression is not an irreversible neurodegenerative disorder. So it's not like Alzheimer's, where it can't be reversed. Instead, the impact of the brain may be reversible and the brain can heal. So instead of thinking like, oh man, like if you're depressed, your brain can never get back to where it was. That's not the case. It actually can. It can heal, but there's going to be treatments and things like that plays a part. And I just wanted to acknowledge some areas of the brain that are affected, so some of y'all can be familiar with it. So your hippocampus, that affects your long-term memory, and again, that also raises the cortisol, which is that stress hormone that affects the development of your brain, and that can also shrink the brain as well. Your thalamus, which is when you are depressed, you have a neglect of attention and learning deficits. Your frontal cortex, managing your thinking, your emotions, your personality, your judgment, self-control, muscle control. Prefrontal cortex, your dysfunction of mood-related behaviors. So again, I just named the different parts of your brain. And I want you to think back of what I mentioned before about what depression looks like and how that can be affecting your brain, and that goes to the activities you do on a daily basis. Go on to the next slide. I wanted to address therapy, right? So you have depression. What do you do? So these are 5 different types of therapy that I like to talk about when it comes to addressing depression. And these types of therapies can also be addressed in different types of psychiatric disorders as well, but we're focusing solely on depression today, right? So cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. This is a type of therapy that focuses on modifying your negative thoughts, behaviors, and emotional responses that are associated with psychological depression. The way I like to break it down is something called a CBT triangle. So I want you to imagine a triangle, and on each point, put a word. So your thought, feelings, and behaviors. And it doesn't really matter the order, but essentially I want you to understand that your thoughts can influence your behaviors, Your behaviors can influence your feelings. Your thoughts can influence your feelings, which can influence your behaviors. How you feel can influence how you think, and how you think can influence how you act. How you act can influence how you feel, and how you feel can influence how you think, and so on and so on. They're all interchangeable. So think about it. If you're depressed, you're going to be thinking sad thoughts, which makes you feel sad. And as a result, what is your behaviors going to be? You know what? I don't feel like doing anything. I'm gonna lay down. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not in the mood, right? And as a result, you're not doing anything. How's it gonna make you more feel? It's gonna make you feel even, make you feel more sad. And then what that's gonna cause? Make you have more sad thoughts. So it's a cycle. That CBT triangle is important, and cognitive behavioral therapy really helps you disrupt that cycle. IPT, interpersonal therapy. So that focuses on relieving symptoms by improving your interpersonal and social functioning. That addresses both your current problems and relationships rather than like your childhood and your developmental issues. You're not really going back to your past and childhood. You're focusing what's affecting you right here and now. Both CBT and IPT focus on understanding and modifying certain processes or your behaviors, right? Next is ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. This focuses on being on the present moment and accept thoughts and feelings without judgment. When you're depressed, you're typically judging yourself. You're feeling worthless. You're being more self-critical. You're having less self-compassion. Acceptance and commitment therapy really changes how you look at the situation you're in and be more accepting of it. And not to go down a rabbit hole, but I want to just really discuss the difference between certain words that we think that's synonymous. Accepting something and being okay are two different things. Acceptance commitment therapy focuses on acceptance. You could be accepting of a situation and still not be okay with that situation. Next is psychodynamic therapy. So this is based on the idea that a person's behavior is affected by the unconscious mind and their past experiences. So this takes you back. This is more of that Freudian psychology that people may be aware of. It's really an open-ended exploration of your person's feelings, with multiple sessions. That's usually the type of therapy, the cliche therapy that you're just laying down on the chair and you're just spitballing everything to the therapist. Last but not least, dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. This is another great therapy that actually started off to treat individuals with borderline personality disorder. But through research and evidence and in trials, it has expanded beyond just borderline personality disorder and going beyond that, such as treating depression. DBT helps you become more accepting of yourself, of your current situation, so you can be motivated to make the changes. It increases interpersonal effectiveness, regulating painful emotions, tolerating emotional distress, developing mindfulness skills to help you become more fully aware and accepting of the present moment. Go to the next slide. Benefits of therapy. So I broke down the types of therapy, but overall, what's the benefits of therapy? Increase your self-esteem, introduces coping mechanisms, improves social and community functioning. You learn strategies designed to help you manage negative thoughts and or process difficult experiences. It's a source of emotional support. You gain insight awareness about your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors, and it also improves your communication skills. So again, I want you to think about what depression looks like and how therapy can play a part in helping with how you navigate, the different symptoms that depression is affecting, not just sadness. Going to the next slide. Just wanted to end with some empirical data and statistics. I looked up the most recent study I found was a study led by the Harvard Medical School, and this was actually, during the period of COVID, which I really appreciated. So over 691,000 people in the United States and United Kingdom between January 23rd, 2021 to June 9th, they gathered data. And they discovered that Black participants in the US were more than 1.16 times more likely to screen positive for depression than white participants. Similar results were seen for Black and Asian participants in the UK, as well as other subgroups. According to the CDC, Black adults are more likely to have depressive symptoms than white adults. According to the US Department of Health and Human Services, suicide was the third leading cause of death, respectively, for African Americans ages 15 to 24 in 2020. And the death rate for suicide in Black or African American men was 4 times greater than for African-American women in 2018. So again, when we think about depression, right? Everything that encompasses with it, it's not just feeling sad. It is also, feeling worthless. It's also not having the energy. It's also not having that appetite. It's also being irritable. There's so many things that goes with depression outside of just feeling solely sad. You go on to the next slide. Oh, all right. I'll pass it over to Kanan.
All right, greetings, everyone. I appreciate you all attending and engaging with us today. Thank you, Dr. Bollier and Brother Bethay. Really appreciate you all's hard work. Every time we do these presentations, I remind them that they saved me the funnest part and they handled the hardest part. So really appreciate you all's hard work. And just getting into self-care strategies here and just a little bit about my background. I'm working towards a PhD in educational psychology, and I teach a sports psychology class at George Mason University, and I work with athletes. So my background, my kind of conversation style is going to be somewhat as a coach or teacher. So if you don't already have a pen and paper in hand, please do. And we're going to try to have some fun with this. We'll have some things to laugh about, but we'll also have some goals and whatnot. So I have two goals really for my piece here that I'm going to try and get you to laugh at least once. So if I don't get that by the end, get my contact info and I owe you a laugh. And the second one, I'm going to try and make sure that you just get one self-care strategy here. So just one thing that you can take away from it. So you can see these categories that I've split self-care into: thoughts, motion, interactions, general well-being strategies, some culturally specific strategies, and nutrition. So literally for each of these, I probably have 5 or 6 strategies, right? So there's a ton of ways to address and impact healthcare, right? And it's hard to kind of go through this because we can't touch on each one as much as I would like to, but I'll just try and introduce you to them. And please just try and take one thing, right? Maybe you're looking right now and thinking, okay, maybe I'll make one adjustment in terms of thoughts, or one adjustment in terms of motion or interactions or general well-being strategies or culturally specific things or nutrition. So whether it's one of these sections that I've laid out or whether there's a specific thing that comes up on the slide, I want you to really commit to taking in one self-care strategy that you're going to add to your daily routine. So I'll go ahead and click to the next slide here. Okay, so when it comes to thoughts, right, Brother Bethay and Dr. Bollier already discussed some thought strategies, but here are just a few right here: cognitive reframing, gratitude, daily affirmations, reset button, nightly examination. I was reading a book the other day, and it asked a question that on the surface level, it felt kind of basic and straightforward. The question was, do you want to be happy or do you want to be sad? And at first glance, it was like, of course I want to be happy, right? But maybe you have an experience and in that moment, you want to be upset about it, right? Maybe you're dealing with grief. Maybe you lost something that was really important to you. So sometimes it's important to allow yourself to feel that sadness, right? Don't just push it away. But then thinking back to the question, ultimately, do you want to be happy or do you want to be sad? And I think in the long run, we would say, ultimately, we want to get back to being happy. So then the next question to ask yourself is, well, what is the route that I have to take to get there, right? And really thinking through what steps, what things can be done, right? How can I work my way back to where I would like to be? So taking some time to really slow down and ask yourself some of these questions and finding ways to reframe the situation in a way that is, I'd say, most helpful to your situation, right? So there are a ton of cognitive reframing strategies. I have some quotes here listed to the right. I'm not going to read all of them individually, but you can get the point in how you word things, even just if you're drinking a cup of water over here, right? My cup of water here, is it half empty or is it half full? It's the same amount of water, but am I seeing it as in abundance or a little bit? Gratitude, There's some pretty good research that shows if you just write one thing a day that you're grateful for, just one thing, maybe you can grow to writing 3 things, and you can add to it by getting to the point where you're explaining it to someone else or bringing it up in conversation, but focusing in on gratitude, because naturally we focus in on negative things so that we can survive. It's our way of protecting ourselves, knowing what dangers are out there, knowing what could go wrong. A lot of the times, a lot of us, we wake up and we right away, we think about, what do I have to work on? What's on my to-do list? What things must get done? But we have to balance that out with being grateful, being appreciative. So one way to do that is by writing things you're grateful for. There's some research that shows that to have a good relationship or a good experience, you generally need a 3-to-1 or maybe even a 5-to-1 and maybe even more ratio of good to bad things. But we actually get told no 3 to 5 times as many times as we get told yes. So one of the ways that we can somewhat re-engineer that ratio is by writing, talking about, and being cognizant of the things that we're grateful for. Daily affirmations go right along with that. Just having something that you tell yourself every day or that you write down every day that gets you going. For me, I take a sport mindset to this. So my thing that I say is I take pride in the way I compete. That's what I say to myself when I get up, when I'm getting myself going, right? I take pride in the way I compete. And everyone doesn't have to look at like the day as a competition, but maybe you can just say, I take pride in the way that I carry myself, or I take pride in the way that I treat my friends, or I take pride in the way that I do my job. And there's an endless list of daily affirmations. I'm sure some of you already have quotes that mean something to you. So just using those quotes every day, even if you have them posted up in your bedroom so you have to see them. The next thing here is a reset button. So a reset button is basically something physical and something verbal that you can do to reset. So my reset button literally is 2 taps on the chest. That's the physical thing. And every time I do that, I say to myself, focus on me and do the next right thing. That's just my reminder. When things aren't maybe going ideal or not going exactly how I would like for them to, that's just my reminder. All right, get back, focus on me, and just do the next right thing. Because ultimately, you only can control how you act in situations and what you're going to do next, right? What's in the past, you can't go back and change. So really being focused on yourself in challenging situations can be helpful. And then for me, just saying, all right, well, what's the next right step? Because sometimes a problem isn't solvable in a moment, but they say the journey of 1,000,000 miles starts with the first step. So just figuring out, well, what's the next right thing that I can do in this situation? But your reset button can be anything. Just have something physical that you do. So it could be a tap on the back of the head. It could be rolling up your fist. It could be cracking your fingers. It could be just standing up, right? It could be stretching. But when you do that physical thing, have something verbal that you say to yourself that reminds you to take the next right step, or take pride in how you compete, or be grateful, or be appreciative, or anything that you could think of that gets you motivated to take the next right step. Nightly examination, this can be really informal, but just at the end of the day, just thinking of, okay, well, what am I doing well, and what can I improve, and what do I appreciate? Really just those 3 basic things, right? Knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, and your adjustments. You can almost do it as you're falling asleep, or if you like to be really calculated and strategic, you can write it down so you can record and see the progress each day. But just asking yourself this, you can see where you're at and be prepared to go where you want to go next. Apologies here, trying to get to this next slide. Okay, so motion. Sometimes we just don't think enough about how moving well can positively impact our well-being, right? Something just as simple as having routines and habits can help you avoid procrastination. So maybe you have laid out at the start of your day the first few things that you like to do. I like to end the day with knowing what are the first 2 or 3 tasks that I have to do. Because if I get the first 2 or 3 done, then it's easy to keep that momentum going. It's easier, right? So just starting off on a good note. Something as basic as standing up. Those of you that have Apple Watches, you probably get the reminder that after an hour or so, you should stand up. And there's real research behind that that shows that we're supposed to be moving for at least 3 minutes per hour. So even now, if you want to just take a quick second and stand up, for me, right, we've been sitting here for maybe an hour, a little more, but literally just taking a second, standing up, walking around for a minute, it helps your blood flow. Our bodies and mind are designed to be active, to be participants in what's going on. So maybe for someone else, it's getting exercise in. If you don't have time to go to the gym, or doing COVID when we didn't have as much access to gyms, finding body weight workouts. My strategy now, I don't have as much time as I would like to go to the gym, so I end up doing a few push-ups before hitting the shower, right? Maybe you just have a 5-minute routine you put together. If you shower every day, you're only losing 5 minutes, right? Or even if you don't have the 5 minutes, right? Just do as many push-ups as you can in a set, or as many sit-ups as you can, right? Or even 30 seconds of squats. Maybe you go into a week where you know this is going to be the busiest week of your life, and you're like, all right, I'm not going to have time to work out at all this week, but maybe that's when you need it most. So that's when you really lock in on, right before I hit the shower, I'll just do as many sit-ups as I can every day, or I'll do a set of push-ups and a set of sit-ups and go shower, right? So just getting your routine together, finding ways to just fit it in where you can. Getting sunlight is important and helpful. We overlook this, but the sun provides so many helpful things to us, too many things to list, right? We know vitamin D, but just in general, the sun impacts our well-being so much, right? So just getting out and getting sunlight when you can. Maybe you just take a second in a busy day, you walk outside, get sunlight for 20, 30 seconds, and get back to work, right? It doesn't have to be, all of these things are things that can be done in just a few minutes. Deep breathing exercises. So I'll try and take you all through one right now. If you want to take a second here with me, just kind of sit back in your chair if you'd like. The way I like to do the deep breathing exercise, I like to try and just relax every muscle as much as you can. So if you're sitting somewhere, if you could just plant your feet on the floor, take your arms, you can let them hang, or you can set them on your lap, but just try and get to the point where none of your muscles are working. Right now, I'm sitting back in my chair. I'm going to put my hands on my lap here. None of my muscles are working at all, other than me talking to you guys. So I'm going to close my eyes. You don't have to close your eyes, but for me, it helps. And for other people, I've heard that it helps because it helps you focus internally, right? So, and your body too registers. If I'm sitting and not using any muscles and my eyes are closed, then I must be able to relax. The demands of the world are not pushing on me right now. I can sit and focus on myself. So just try and start to breathe as slow as you can here. I'm going to do it with you all. Just let the breathing slow down to the point where you may be breathing in for 5 seconds and breathing out for 5 seconds. But don't feel like you're forcing it. Just let the breath come and go as slow as it can. And I like to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth. You can even breathe in through your mouth or out through your nose. I like to do one or the other though. So breathe in one way and out the other way. So as you're doing this, I'll just provide a few more facts as I'm trying to breathe as slow as I can too. There's research that shows when you slow down your heart rate like this, it somewhat emulates sleeping. So, you know, sleep is when your mind recovers. It's when your body recovers. It's when your system basically shuts down and reboots. So just doing 1 minute of this has been shown to have positive impacts on decreasing heart rate, decreasing levels of stress, you know, decreasing all of these negative things that we don't want to feel. So I'll add one last piece to this deep breathing exercise. There's some research that shows if you take 2 breaths in to 1 breath out, it could be even more relaxing. So as you take that breath in, even breathe in deep like you were. And at the top of that breath, just try and suck in one more set of air. So I'll do it. So 2 breaths in through your nose. Make the first breath as deep as you can. And at the last second, pull in a little bit more air. Then just let it run out slowly. All right, we can come back to. Hopefully nobody fell asleep on me right there. I almost was ready for a nap myself. But I think when we do that deep breathing exercise, there's research that shows that your body literally transitions into the level of heart rate and breathing rate that you're in when you sleep. So any kind of stress that you feel, you'll naturally loosen up on it for the most part, right? And there are more things to do. You can work on some visualization along with it. You can focus in on your breathing. As we were talking through the breathing, I hope everybody was able to just take their mind off of everything else and focusing on the breathing. So we'll get into some more self-care strategies here. Interactions, smiling, laughing, giving compliments, mutual sharing interventions. There's some research that shows we do mutual sharing interventions where basically one person talks for maybe 2 to 5 minutes and the other person just listens. So the listener can maybe have a few questions lined up, but they're not prying questions. They're more so just clarifying things if something wasn't clear. But a lot of the times, if you think back towards conversations that you've had, oftentimes people are just waiting for their opportunity to jump in. When I've done this with my class, a lot of people say this is one of the few times in life that they felt someone was just genuinely listening and not waiting for their turn to talk, right? They were genuinely listening, paying attention to, and appreciating what the person was saying. So this is something you could do with a friend or with a group of people, just saying, hey, one person's going to talk for 2 to 5 minutes. The listener can have some set aside questions just to clarify things if the talker doesn't have as much to say. I don't think we have enough time today to try this, and a lot of us are by ourselves on our Zoom call. But this is something that you could do with a friend or with a group of people. One person talks for a few minutes, the listener just listens. After 2 to 5 minutes of the talker talking, then the listener can have a minute or two to respond. And then the listener becomes the talker for 2 to 5 minutes. And then the first person that talks then listens to the other person. So that's just a strategy to help build interactions and give people an opportunity to talk and be heard. Reconciling conflict. So I've already started to jump into this a little bit, but a lot of the times it's helpful to have a 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions. And this research has grown. I've gotten to see it get up to 5-to-1. And then what's really intriguing too is the Gottmans who've done this research, they say they can predict with 90% accuracy the success of relationships between people. And the same kind of thing impacts whether it's romantic relationships or relationships with a good friend. It's important to have a 3-to-1 ratio or 5-to-1 ratio per se of positive to negative interactions. This is important because, like we discussed at the start, negative things weigh us down more than positive things do. So if we lose $20 in the morning and find $20 at night, those two things don't even out exactly. If we lose 20, we're more likely to be upset than the finding 20 makes us happy, right? So for an event to go well, if you just say you go to the movies and you have 10 negative events and 10 positive things, right? You'll view it as a negative experience. Most likely, most people will, because the negative things weigh heavier, right? So we need to have a positive ratio, but also we need to be more appreciative and more in tune with the things that we're grateful for and the things that we appreciate. So you can see on the right side of the screen too, talk about like strategies to build and connect relationships. The 4 horsemen are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Again, we could have a whole conversation just about this, but for the sake of time, I'll just get into the 4 other ways to deal with it are gentle startup to a conversation, building a culture of appreciation, taking responsibility, and physiological self-soothing. So it's really important that when we're in relationships, and by relationships, I just mean someone you're interacting with, it's really important that we're finding ways to not be too critical, but having positive ways to address situations. showing appreciation consistently, right? If you work with a team, you can find a way almost every day to give a compliment, say something positive. People really do appreciate that. It goes a long way. Take responsibility when you have an opportunity to, when there's something that you can do better. And then physiological self-soothing also is important. So getting into one of the last ways here for well-being, just general well-being strategies, journaling, meditation, visualization, sleeping, relaxing, PERMA. A lot of the times when we think about happiness, we think of pleasure, but the research is showing that happiness comes from what Marty Seligman, former APA president, calls PERMA: purpose, engagement, relationships, meanings, and accomplishments or achievements. So focusing in on these areas, finding things that you're passionate about, being really engaged, building strong relationships, finding meaning, and working towards accomplishments and working towards things that are important to you. Culturally specific well-being strategies. So a lot of the times, as Black people, we have culture that we utilize to experience well-being, right? Whether that's joining a fraternity, joining a group of people, doing some activism, healing circles. Even for therapy, there's research that shows, especially for Black men, group therapy or having a group of people together and providing a space to discuss things seems to be more effective than just one-on-one conversations. So building up a space, finding your space, right? For some people, maybe it's a sports team. For another person, maybe it's a fraternity. If you're in both, just find a space where you can spend more time and feel most open and most connected. But finding these groups, we come from a culture of playing music, dancing, doing cultural related events, coming together as villages or as groups of people and building up on and showing appreciation for one another. So for some people, it's getting in tune with your culture that can provide you some self-care. And then just some well-being resources. I mean, I know we went through just now a ton of things that you can do all by yourself, but just like with a sports team, it's more helpful to have a coach guide you through some of this than maybe it is for you to just do it by yourself. So I really do recommend getting a therapist. This is something that even me, as someone that's been in the space of psychology, has utilized, or even using this app, this 10% app. I know there are a ton of apps out there, but this is one that I've utilized. This is one that's helpful for me. And I've had some of these links here if people wanted to get access to the presentation. A lot of these things were clickable, but a positive psychology class at Harvard, and I believe this science of well-being class at Yale is completely free, or at least it was during COVID. So taking advantage of the resources that are out there. I mean, we could have put together a longer list, but I wanted to show you like specific things that I've looked into and can really vouch for and say these were helpful for me, and I encourage them for you. Nutrition is important. So, I mean, this is maybe one of the things that is overlooked a little bit. Sometimes when we think about mental health, we don't think as much about the biological aspects of it. So really helping your body and your mind get to its best place. Something like omega-3 fats, and you can look this up and fact check it. It has been proven to decrease depression and decrease some of these different mental disorders, because your brain has an amount of fat in it, right? If you don't have the right balance, if you don't have the right fats in there, then it can lead to some mental health issues. So I really do encourage just taking 1 teaspoon of cod liver oil or your omega fat of choice a day, vitamins and supplements. There's a ton of different things out there. Drinking water, eating vegetables, all of these things add up and can be really helpful. Okay, so we really appreciate you all listening through our presentation here. I think we left some time here for questions, and that's all I have for today, but look forward to hearing any questions you all have.
All right, so thank you, brother, for that wealth of information. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it over to our vice bossless, brother Ruel Dixon, our district keeper of finance, and he's going to monitor the chat for us.
Thank you, Brother Walton. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge Brother Dr. Ural Hall, who's a 10th D Brother You On My Mind chair, and Shelley Pollard, who is from the Office of Communication and Public Liaison at the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities, NIMHD.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Brother Hill. And as we go on, my first question that we have in the group here, can you share how we can promote mental health awareness in Black and Brown communities better to separate from the stigma of being weak? And that could go for any one of the panelists.
Well, Kenny, you want to go?
You could go. You already started.
All right. Honestly, I think just engaging in these kind of programs like this, I feel like it's just having conversations. I think to get rid of the stigma is just to really normalize what mental health is, really normalize going to therapy, normalizing expressing your emotions. The thing is that there's a stigma about it because we have this idea on how it should be, and it's a way that we need to unlearn. Something I always tell my clients is that when we're younger, we're trying to learn everything, but as we get older, there's a lot of things we need to unlearn. And that's something that a lot of people don't really realize, that they've learned a lot of things that weren't always correct, wasn't always accurate. It was probably a myth, was probably false, and just understanding that you need to unlearn some of these things. So engaging in these conversations, having conversations with your friends, talk about your feelings, so they can feel comfortable that it's acceptable, so that's appropriate. And lastly, but not least, I really try to normalize, there's different types of health, like you have your physical health, going to the gym, you have your spiritual health, going to church, and mental health is something that we don't really talk about, so if I'm trying to lose weight, I'm gonna go to the gym. If I'm trying to get closer to God, I'm gonna go to church. If I want to, address my mental health, I'm gonna see a therapist. And, understanding that, there's a specialist for each of these types of health. So if I'm trying to get closer to God, I'm not going to see my PCP. I'm going to go to church. If I'm trying to lose weight, I'm not going to go to church. I'm going to go to the gym. So if I'm trying to address my mental health, I'm going to see a therapist, because I'm going to see a professional instead of like talking to, if you think talking to a person or just a friend, it's not the same effect. So really just trying to normalize just talking to people, engaging in these kind of programs, and really just normalizing the effect, and it'll spread.
In addition to what Dr. Boulier just shared, there is a touring group of brothers. It's entitled Just Heal Bro, and they have a forum where they invite men, mostly Black men, to just sit and discuss the different stresses that we have experienced in our life. They came to Philadelphia in November, and I attended. One of the things that they really stressed that I don't think we stress enough in the Black community is that we as Black men need to build friendships with other Black men. We, in our community, often look at leaning on someone emotionally as a sign of weakness. And as Black men in particular, we often feel that, or are taught to believe, that we are all we need. And that if we need someone else, it's a woman. But in this Just Heal Bro, they helped us to understand that using a woman or utilizing a woman as your only source of emotional support is bound to fail.
So brother,
You're muted, brother.
This one, yeah, thank you. So this one goes out in along those lines, right? So how do the messages that we received as young people impact our mental well-being today? In particular, like the messages received about being men, right? When we were kids, we fell, and then our parents or someone said, "Stop crying," or "Suck it up," or even to the point with the bros, with the bros, the way we are with each other. How does that impact our well-being now?
I think it adds chronic stress to your life, where you are always in a fight or flight mindset. You're unable to be comfortable totally because you don't let totally around other people because you don't let your guard down due to it being a unspoken competition at all moments. You look at it, this person is trying to get one up on me. And so that then leads to health issues, maybe not mental health, but physical health. And I think we as men need to say, yeah, we are going to push each other. We are going to challenge each other. But at the same time, we are going to provide that safe space to be vulnerable. I think true friendship entails vulnerability, which has not been a part of our conversations as Black men.
In addition to what Brother Bethea was saying, I just wanted to add that the reason how it affects, I guess, Black men now, they don't know how to express their emotions effectively. They don't know how to recognize their emotions. They're not aware of their emotions because they were never told to embrace said emotions. And like I said about the irritability, the only emotion that was quote unquote acceptable is anger, is frustration. So when you're feeling sad, you don't cry, you just get angry. So as an adult, when you're feeling sad, you don't cry, you get angry. And when you don't know how to communicate, if you don't know how to learn how to express your emotions effectively, that can cause, like what Brother Bethea was saying, physical health problems, relationship problems, a wide variety of interpersonal problems, because you were never told that it's okay to feel said emotions. And if you don't know how to feel your emotions, you won't know how to react to it when you feel it. You won't even know that you're feeling it. You won't know how to articulate how you're feeling. So that goes back to communication. And it just opens up a wide variety of just like issues. So understand that it's okay to feel whatever emotion that you have, and just normalizing that aspect. But that's something that we as men have to, teach the younger generation, normalize to the younger generation to embrace and feel whatever emotion you're feeling. Because if that's not the case, they're going to grow up as men feeling an emotion, not knowing why they feel this way, and then react in an unhealthy, maladaptive manner.
To piggyback back off of what Dr. Boulier just said, as he mentioned, anger is the only emotion that we have been conditioned or allowed to experience. But anger is a secondary emotion. So anytime you're feeling anger, you're first feeling hurt, ashamed, or afraid. So anger is not an emotion that you experience alone or solitarily. So we have to help the future generations understand all of their emotions, not just the anger.
Thank you. And if you're listening and you want to share, ask a question privately, you could do so. I've gotten a few messages, questions privately, which I'll address to the panel right now. One, if the CDC acknowledges depression and depressive symptoms in Black people has been more predominant than our white counterparts, right? And speaking more so to externalizing behaviors, right? Why are Black men or people demonized instead of helped? And if so, why has this knowledge not being transitioned to first responders like police officers, and for them to understand that now you need to handle these things with more with a different lens per se.
Well, one, just to address the police officer thing, police officers aren't mental health experts. Police officers aren't mental health professionals. So when you call a police officer for a mental health issue, they're going to respond in a way that they were trained as an officer. And that's the issue right there. You know, understanding that when there's certain issues, don't call a police officer, you call a mental health professional, or you call some sort of other emergency situation. But then that also goes back to funding, because police officers in the police department is overly funded, which is why this whole drama about defunding police. So if there was more resources for other other types of support to address said mental health issues, we won't need police officers to learn to respond to this situation, because other resources have said funding to address it. So if somebody's having a mental health crisis, instead of calling a police officer, maybe we can call another type of department. Maybe we can call EMS and they can take them to a psychiatric department, a psychiatric hospital or something like that, But understanding that police officers are not the go-to for everything. They're not mental health professionals, you know, and there's been deaths in the Black community because people had mental health crises and police officers were quote unquote scared, and the first thing you need to do is shoot. So understanding that we need to change the conversation to training police officers better, to funding other resources to address their mental health issues.
Can I piggyback on that, Dr. Beaulier?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm Dr. Ural Hill, and I'm the chairman of the Brother You're on My Mind committee from the 10th district. And I want to give my propers to Marlon Griffin for beginning this effort in the 1st district. With regard to Black men and violence and depression, Brother Bethea brought it up as well. You know, too often we need to get to the Black man before the depression manifests itself in violence. You know, we have anger, then it goes to depression, and then most often our depression is manifested through violence because of the lack of conflict reconciliation skill sets, communication skill sets, and understanding of ourselves. Secondly, so the label has been placed on us from the time we came here on the slave ships. And we have what we call post-traumatic slavery syndrome that is not in the DSM-5, but we have some long felt anger, frustration, and unfinished business. Now, by the time we get to the point where if we don't get this mental health, let's say, prevention and intervention, thus training our children, our young males, how to identify their feelings, how to name them, how to talk about them, and then how to resolve conflict and how to feel comfortable going to mental health resources, then we get on the tail end, the prison system becoming the #1 provider of mental health services for Black men in this country. And then the lack of resources poured into mental health services. So it's a complex dynamic, but this begins the process. And I just want to laud your credit and the brothers' credit, Dr. Marion and et al., in beginning the process of getting the brothers to get this message to the community. And I just hope the best for you. I know this is your inaugural event in the 1st district, that you continue to get the word out and communicate, encourage, educate, and uplift our community beyond Omega Psi Phi. God bless you.
All right. We have one more question and just a few more minutes left, but I wanted to get to this one. This person is seeking tips / information to help a very dear friend who has been suffering from panic attacks as a result of stress, of returning back outside to work, etc., after the pandemic. Could you share some tips, solution to prevent them, and what to do as they are occurring? And that goes for any of the panelists.
As a mental health professional, a therapist, I would suggest that they go to seek medical attention. If they're having panic attacks, I would start with their primary care physician. If they don't have a primary care physician, then I would direct them to a crisis center or a urgent care.
Okay.
I think when it comes to anxiety and panic attack, there's ways to, I guess, address your anxiety before it gets to the point of you having a panic attack. And one of the best things that I like to suggest is something that Kanan was discussing earlier with the deep breathing, is practicing mindfulness. Something I tell people all the time when it comes to depression, anxiety is depression is worry about the past and anxiety is worry about the future. And mindfulness brings you to the present. Mindfulness focuses you on what's happening in the here and now. The thing about people having panic attacks is that they're worried about what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next. And you're losing out on what's happening right now. So when you can ground yourself on the here and now, how you feel about what's happening next won't even matter because you're focusing on what you can control right now. And what you can control right now can actually change what you actually may be worrying about in the future. So I like to do it of a more proactive thing than a reactive thing. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to take practice. It's going to take, you know, skills and, you know, seeing a mental health professional to strengthen that. But just understanding that, you know, worrying about the future is something I like to also tell my patients is just a waste of imagination, you know, so bringing yourself back to the present and understanding what you can control right here and now, because another thing with anxiety is that fear of not having control, you know, so really focusing on and grounding yourself on what can you control right now? What can you do right now in this moment to make yourself feel a little bit more relaxed, engaging in distress tolerance skills as well. And that's something that's actually explored in DBT and something I introduced when I was talking about types of therapy. So I think seeing a mental health professional can actually help, you know, address that as well.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges with like these kind of scenarios is oftentimes it's layered and there's more going on, right? So just to offer one self-care routine thing feels like it's not necessarily enough. Like that's why I always encourage having some form of coaching, mental health coach, counselor, therapist, etc. It's like trying to do the biggest thing you have to do at the start of the day versus just getting that text message out the way. It's like, which end do you want to address it? So with that being said, I think all of these like small tips of self-care that were provided are helpful, but in the long run, you really do want to get a coach or a mentor or therapist.
Okay. Brother moderator, Brother Walton, we have like one or two more questions. What you want to do?
So I would we'll ask our panelists if they could extend out and our audience if they could send out for a couple more questions before we close out. You know, typically this runs a little bit over, maybe about additional 5 minutes. So if our panelists can stay and our audience, I think we can continue with those questions because we'd like to give everyone an opportunity to be heard. You know, we appreciate you your interaction. Appreciate the information. So if it's the will of our panelists and our audience, we'll continue on, Brother Dixon.
Okay.
I have to leave in 2 minutes. I have a session at 7:35. So any questions directed to me specifically, I would need to answer immediately.
Duly noted, Brother Bethia. There's none specifically to you, just general questions.
So let him answer the first one, Brother Dixon.
Go ahead. So what's the best way to assist, support, and educate parents in the public sector on the different behavior children express in school to seek out support privately?
That's a great question. I think that's generally kind of locale specific. Different States, cities, townships have different procedures regarding educational support programs. I have no familiarity with the programs in Connecticut or Massachusetts. And so I would suggest them to go to their school counselor or guidance counselor as the first step and inquire. A lot of states have IEPs, individualized education plans. That would probably be the first step, or getting some sort of psychological or psychiatric evaluation, or even just an educational assessment.
Anyone else?
This is in regards to how can I just want to know, I just want to understand if I'm receiving the question.
Yes.
So how to educate, because I see it in the chat. So basically,
Yep.
how to educate the parent about how to navigate, the different behaviors that's going on with their child.
Yes, I'm assuming that's what it is. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So, at the end of the day, like that's something an answer I always, throw in is just seeing a mental health therapist. There's different types of therapies for children, like there's play therapy, therapy. And also I think the idea of what people think therapy is, people think just therapy is just like laying down on a couch and just talking about your feelings and crying, which isn't the case at all. Therapy is something as simple as just having a conversation. I used to do therapy with black and brown boys and girls, and I would play Uno with them and we're just talking. Something as simple as that is therapeutic. So understanding the concept and the idea of what therapy is, just allowing that child to express themselves, and maybe they don't feel comfortable expressing that to their parent. Maybe they'll feel more comfortable expressing that to a professional, and they'll be more equipped to navigate and build that rapport so they can feel comfortable. Having that child engage in maybe in a sport, so they have an outlet to express how they feel, seeing what type of interest that child has, so they can feel like they have that freedom, that autonomy to express what they want to do. Because, at the end of the day, children are still people as well, and we need to allow them to express themselves and have some sort of an autonomy.
All right, brother Dixon, if I may, I know brother Bethea, thank you. I know you got to log on, so just want to say thank you for being here, brother. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, brother. Good night.
Have a good one.
All right, maybe we want one more, or is that it?
That's it.
All right, well, great. So thank you all. That brings us to the end of our program. There was so much helpful information. I see that people are requesting the video, so our bosses has put the information in. When it's available, it can be sent to you. I just want a quick stat that currently there are close to 200,000 employed working therapists in the United States, and only 4% are Black. And ladies and gentlemen, we had 3 of them here with us tonight, and they are members of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. So again, we just want to thank you all for sharing your time, sharing your expertise. We want to thank everyone who joined us this evening, brothers from all over the country, our Grand Boss list. And I'm not going to start calling out names because we forget someone and you're in trouble. But the Grand Boss list was on, and so I think we could be very proud of the fact that he took time out of his busy day all the way on the West Coast to be with us this evening. So with that, Brother Griffin, thank you for all of your help in setting this up. I think, brother, You're on My Mind is off to a great hit, and I look forward to the fellowship in a couple of weeks down here in New Haven for the 86th First District Conference. And I will turn it over to Brother Chair, Brother Giggy Martindale, to take us out.
Sorry, brothers, I was on mute. Again, thank you to the panelists. Thank you for the audience, and thank you for everyone that could participate in that. And once again, April 22nd at the First District Conference, we're going to have another event
the Brother You're on My Mind presentation. Look forward to seeing everyone there, and also a financial literacy presentation at the conference. So once again, thanks everybody. Have a good night.
All right, thank you, Brother Hill.
Thanks, bros.
Appreciate it, bros.
Right.
Well done, bros. Peace.
Don't forget get those tickets for the Royal Affair.
Right. EII, stay on the phone if you can.
Yes, sir.
Are we in order, Ruel, or Brother Bassos?
No, not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
All right, we good.
Okay. All right. Good job, everybody. I think this was well done. Any thoughts?
Good job, bro.
I think Brother Midnight, I think all that drinking you're doing is a sign you're trying to mask your depression.
It's not to drink it, brother.
I was listening like, yo, basically every black man is depressed, bro.
Not you. You don't drink. Too much of that jerk pork, though.
That's depression.
No, it is though, and yeah, it brings up some great points, right? We the message that we receive that we don't talk about our feelings and stuff like that. And if you talk about your feelings, you're soft.
Hey, bros, peace. Sorry, bro. Dixon, can you stop the recording?